The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Welcome to Vicious Whispers with Mark Tullius, your source for horror, sci-fi, suspense, and all things violent.
Thank you guys so much for joining me today on Vicious Whispers with Mark Tullius. Today we have episode 81 with a very special guest, Zach Waldman. Zach, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, sir. It's good to be here. Nice to see you after all this time.
Yeah.
Friendly face during the quarantine. Zoom's not as good as getting to spar with you in person, but
it's been a while. I was trying to think back to when we first met. We had probably rolled a couple times, but I think the first time I got a chance to really hang out with you, get to meet you, was Eddie's podcast.
I was going to say that. I meant to ask you that. You did Eddie Bravo Radio, right? And we talked about your books. And
I smoked too much, but it was a fun time. Now I wanted to talk to you about a couple different things.
What belt are you now, by the way?
Purple.
Okay, I got to know what I'm dealing with here. So.
Yeah. I know it's
no purple belt. Come on, that's the purple for me, man. That was I think the hardest belt for me to get. Well, I mean, I haven't gotten my black belt yet, but I felt like going from purple to brown was easier than going from blue to purple. You know, I don't know about you, but that was my experience.
I was really proud of the purple belt.
Me too.
When I went to headquarters, dude, I had been a blue belt from 8 years prior, but I hadn't trained. And so I threw my blue belt away, went back to white, and then got my blue under Eddie. And then, so when I got my purple, I was I was proud because I put in the time. And that's probably one of the few accomplishments. But I am a little bit bummed. I don't know. We'll see whether or not I ever get my brown.
Bro, I mean, I didn't want to. You started asking something. I didn't mean to derail you. It's just, I'm 46. I got my brown belt at 45, and I was like, all right, man, I want to get my black belt before I'm 50. And this COVID has just thrown such a wrench into that. It's like, but so here we are. So I'm with you, man. It's frustrating.
So when did you start training? When did you first find jiu-jitsu? And what has it done for you? And was that with Eddie? Did you start with 10th Planet?
Oh, yeah. So I started in 2007. How I discovered it is I moved here. I'm not originally from Chicago, but I was living in Chicago. I moved from Chicago to L.A. And I got very lucky. I had a connection with a friend in a comedy troupe that was doing a thing at the Comedy Store. And Comedy Store was pretty dead also in 2000. I moved here September 1st of 2000. I live in Santa Monica. And the very first place I performed in LA was in the belly room of the Comedy Store. And I knew who Joe Rogan was prior to this because of News Radio and because of his affiliation with Sacred Cow Productions. Kevin Booth was Bill Hicks's best friend. Bill Hicks, my all-time favorite comic. His best friend, Kevin Booth, had produced one of Rogan's early stand-up DVDs, also produced and distributed early Alex Jones DVDs. Like when Alex Jones went to Bohemian Grove, that was that company that put that out. Anyway, at that point, that was when I learned Rogan was a stand-up. I knew him from News Radio, but then when I found out he was a big Bill Hicks fan and that he did stand-up, I bought that DVD. And then, when I bought it, it was in Chicago. So here I move out here. My first gig's at the Comedy Store, and I'm walking from the belly room to the OR, the original room, and there's Rogan on stage. I'm like, damn, that's that guy. He wasn't the huge star he is now at this point. I mean, he was famous, but not like on the level he is now. And so I watched him. He crushed. He was awesome. I said hi to him. I kept on doing the belly room once a week, kept seeing him. And he told me about, you should try this jiu-jitsu thing. So I had heard of jiu-jitsu because I was a fan of the original UFCs. Mm-hmm. And I forgot exactly what it was called. I just knew that the grapplers, like the wrestling, grappling type guys, were the ones in the early days that were dominating. And so I didn't do it right away. That was in 2000 when I first met him. So some years go by, and I was always into working out and stuff, but for some reason, when I got to LA, which is a super healthy city, I wasn't really working out anymore. I was just gigging all the time, and I was doing horrible things to my body. And I was just, it was just, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You're new to LA. And so um what happened though was, I mean, God, this could be an epic tale, but long story short, I ended up having horrible anxiety. I was randomly beat up by these two guys in front of my apartment building. They knocked me out. It's a whole thing. And I ended up being diagnosed with PTSD. And I realized I had a long history of trauma, anxiety, and depression, but this getting beaten up was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and sent me into a really bad place. I didn't want to leave my apartment. I'd see a girl walking her dog, and I'd be like, what is she, crazy? I'm not going out there, and it was devastating. I didn't even know what was wrong with me. To be honest with you, I didn't know what was happening. I lucked across a course on anxiety and depression from an infomercial of all places. One of the first things she advised was like taking care of the basics, like exercise and eating right. So I was like, all right, I was so miserable. I'm an action taker. If you tell me that I need to exercise and I haven't done it in a long time, and if that's going to help with what's going on with me, I'll do it. So I got a membership at the YMCA, and after just a short time, I was like, maybe this is why I stopped working out, because this is boring. Mm-hmm. And I know it's good for me, but I need more than this. I need something for my mind. So I started thinking maybe of activities. And I thought, you know what? You did martial arts as a kid. You never did any real martial arts. I did a lot of Wing Chun and other nonsense, but I'm not saying Wing Chun is nonsense, but at the school I went to, it was nonsense. There was a lot of talk about, channeling your chi. And anyway, I got stories about that. I went to you couldn't call it a McDojo, because it wasn't that. It was more like, evangelical. It was a really weird scene. It was more cult-like, than McDojo-like. But anyway, I thought back, and then I started thinking, okay, what's that thing in the UFC, the grappling? And Rogan kept on mentioning it to me. And it's like, yeah, it's jujitsu, right? So I started researching jujitsu, and then I learned that there was gi and no gi. And I just, based on my research, decided I think I'm more interested in no gi. Seems like there's less laundry to do. Seems more practical for the real world. It appealed to me. So at this time, I mean, I didn't even realize that it was rare to have a no-gi, a school that was completely no-gi. And so I just typed in no-gi jiu-jitsu Santa Monica or Los Angeles, and up comes this place on La Brea, Legends. So they offer, Eddie Bravo's the jiu-jitsu instructor. So I Google Eddie Bravo, and I find his Wikipedia page, and I see that he's an advocate for cannabis. Oh, geez. Phone. And it opened up. It just opened Eddie Bravo's Wikipedia page, my phone, from me talking. It's always listening, man. Yeah. And so he was a big advocate of cannabis. I'm like, I like this guy. He does no gi. Okay. Oh, Joe Rogan's one of his students. I'm like, oh man, if I go, this is not only what Joe was talking about, this is the exact place. So I know if I go there, I'm going to know one person. And at that time, the rule at 10th Planet was you had to either have a year of grappling experience, or you had to take 3 private one-on-one classes with either Brent Littell or Scott Einstein Epstein. Both those guys were the highest ranked belts Eddie had at the time, and they were both brown belts. At this point, Eddie had never given anybody a black belt. And so I had never done anything like this, so I did the 3 private classes. I didn't know Scott from Brent. Scott's more my size, but Brent is who I went with, because that was the first name that was given to me. It was just given 2 names, and So I went, and it was me and some other guy doing the same thing I was doing, and Brent Littell instructing, and we did the first class, and it was, I really questioned whether or not it was something I could do after I did that first one. Then I went back the second week. It was like once a week for 3 weeks, and then it was tough. And then I went back the third time, and the other guy that was in the privates with me, he didn't show up, and he was way younger than me, more athletic, showed way more promise than I did, but he wasn't there. And Brent's like, yeah, he didn't show. It's just you and I. And then after that, I was allowed to go to Eddie's class. Back then, there was no fundamentals program. It was just Eddie's class. And so you go in, and then now I'm in Eddie Bravo's class, and he would instruct us. And it was like, all right, everybody, let's roll. And people are like, you want to roll? I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But you were just thrown to the wolves back then. And luckily, people were nice to me about it and helped me, get through it. And that was, back in 2007. I remember I was, I guess I was 33 years old. So when I started, and I found out later, years later, that at the time I joined 10th Planet, it coincidentally was a time that UFC was just becoming like surging in popularity, and that they were getting a lot of people that wanting to take classes, that they needed a filtering out process, because otherwise they were going to just have all kinds of riffraff in there once and like one and done. And so that was why you had to have a year of experience. But the 3 private classes were specifically designed to be kind of brutal. I've had this years later, Brent was like, yeah, they were supposed to be tough. It was supposed to be, do you really, want to be here? And I fell in love with it. And it began, it was one of the first steps in my recovery process in defeating anxiety and depression. Just my entire life. I mean, I am a poster child for a before and after. Jiu-jitsu, there are always people are saying jiu-jitsu saved my life, or, and I read an article once, I forget the reasoning, but it explained why there are so many amazing before and after stories with jiu-jitsu. I forget what the article said. I mean, I could tell, you all the reasons. For me, it was, it was engaging my mind and my body, and it introduced me to a lifestyle that made the rest of my nights when I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu healthier, because I wanted to stay healthier when I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu so that I would feel good. It's like you don't want to get drunk and be hungover and miss jiu-jitsu. So you just don't drink the night before, or you drink, hardly anything or whatever. And then that becomes a habit. And then the people I was around, the community, I was suddenly around really good people. Instead of, constantly being in, I work in bars and nightclubs. I'm we never said it, but I'm a professional stand-up comedian and magician. And, I guess we did say, because I said the Comedy Store, but forgetting, but the point is, that's what I do for a living. So when your whole lifestyle is bars, nightclubs, that kind of thing, this is a big change, So yeah, it was not the only thing, but it was a huge, I'd probably credit jiu-jitsu to a third of my recovery and my openness, the network of friends I have. I mean, I could go on, I could wax poetic for hours about all of the things jiu-jitsu has done for me. It's been the absolute best thing, one of the best things that's ever happened in my life, for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. Now, have you had, over the course of the 12 or 13 years, how many injuries have you had? Has that been an issue for you? Have you had to learn to train smarter?
No, man. So it's been 13 years, and I got hurt a lot in the beginning. When I was a white belt, I got hurt all the time. And for one reason, I think, is because I had not really done anything like this ever, and everything would just hurt my body. Like someone would just pass my guard and have me in side control, and my rib, it would like snap. And I'd have like a bruised rib where, I couldn't cough or sneeze without it being severe. And so like, remember in the movie Fight Club where he was like, people would join and, you know, they would be, their bodies would be super soft, you know, they'd be, I forget how he puts it. He goes, but after several weeks in Fight Club, they were, you know, chiseled. They were like tough as nails. That's what happened. My body, everything just got tougher. It's like, you know, in Kung Fu, when they have those wooden mook dolls where you pound, you know, you kick them with your shin and you hit them with your forearms. And over time, if you've ever, you know, had a kick checked by a guy that's kicked a wooden mook doll his whole life, it's like concrete. So, you know, I got injured a lot. And then the other reason I got injured a lot was because I had zero athletic ability and I had never done anything like this. So I was hurting myself a lot. You know, you don't know how to move yet. And it's like, just to do a shoulder roll, I had to be taught, like, dude, because I was like, I would hurt myself trying to do a shoulder roll because I would be rolling over my head and my neck. It took somebody to show me to roll over my shoulder. You know what I mean? And it sounds silly to anybody that took gymnastics as a kid, but, you know, I was a fat, nerdy kid. I played baseball. I was a good baseball player, but that's the only thing I ever did that was sort of athletic. And so, but I wouldn't say, as I got better at jujitsu, I'll also say this: most of the people I ever hurt doing jujitsu, when I hurt them, was when I was a white belt. You know, it's like you're much safer rolling with purple, brown, and black belts than white belts and blue belts. There's just a way higher sense of control. And by the way, you know, when I remember being a blue belt, I got hurt really bad by a white belt because he was just spazzing out. And so even though I was a blue belt, I didn't have the experience yet to settle somebody like that down and control him. And he's just flailing around, punching me in the face, stabbing me in the eye. And it's like, geez, I'm getting my ass kicked because he doesn't mean to. He's apologizing, but he's just flailing and smacking the crap out of me. So it's funny, even though I'm 46 now, I almost never get injured, knock on wood. I've been injury free for years. I mean, I'm always sore, but that's just, I don't know. It's 46. I think everything just is going to hurt, you know?
Yep.
And I think just accept it. Yeah.
Now, how about COVID? So what has COVID done to your training? Are you able to train at all? Is it, has it impacted you like that?
Well, since the beginning, I've always known of places. I get direct messages from friends. There's always been a place I have the opportunity to train since that have never stopped. People, you know, people that do jujitsu are addicted and they're going to find a way. So I was invited to a lot of garages, a lot of places. And in the beginning, I took a couple of weeks to assess, maybe more than a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, but this is what happened. In my mind, I always believed the idea of the lockdown was to flatten the curve, not to eradicate the virus. So when the curve was flattened, I decided to go back to training because I'm like, well, it was never about it being a risk for somebody healthy like me. It was about not wanting to overwhelm the healthcare system. And it was also about not giving it to your grandparents, but I'm completely isolated. I'm completely alone in my apartment with around nobody. So I'm not giving it to anybody. And so I went back to training and I was doing that for a while. And then a friend of mine got COVID before he got it real early, like in February. Well, you know, Mickey. And yeah, Mickey got it, you know, before everybody was flipping out about it. And he ended up, it's been now over 6 months and he's still not better. Wow. And they call these people long haulers. And it's these certain people that get COVID and they don't die, but they're also not getting better. And he's like, yeah, I went back to work, but I get winded going up a flight of stairs. He's still like, and so that scared me because he's young, no pre-existing conditions. I know other people that got it that shook it off like it was nothing. I know a lot of people say this, but I believe I had it at the end of February, but who knows? I haven't taken any tests. So what happened was because of my friend not, you know, getting over it, our friend, you know him too, and other people I knew. And then I have a friend that's in, you in the healthcare. You know, she's a physician assistant, which is like almost like a doctor, right? And she thought I was batshit crazy for training. I had family members mad at me, you know, about it. So I stopped and went back to just sitting in my apartment, trying not to hang myself with my brown belt. And so now that's been the case for a long time now. And my plan was to go back, was to go and train with some people last night. The only reason I didn't is because I was too hungover, which was also funny because I don't even really drink much anymore. But that goes to show like the kind of trouble I'm getting into. So right now, I feel like the risk is so minimal. The people that I would be training with are people that are only training with each other. It's not like it's a bunch of randos. It's like we have an agreement. Like it's just going to be us, and we're all kind of in my boat. So we're keeping it, and some people might disagree with that.
You know,
I could get talked out of it in the next 20 minutes by you. That's the thing. I keep oscillating. One moment I'm like, screw it. I'm going to go train because I need to emotionally and physically. I'm paying too big of a price. Then 20 minutes later, I get talked out of it because I get scared. So I never know. I don't know who to believe. I don't know what to believe. And I don't know what the right thing to do is. But when you're talking to me right now, my plan is literally tonight I was going to go and train with some friends.
That's cool. And dude, I 100% support it. One reason why I invited you on is because I like how you have an open mind. It seems like I think you do a good job of listening to both sides.
Try.
I think that's super important, whether it's COVID or politics or whatever, because the world's fucking crazy right now. And like one thing I embrace is I don't know shit. Like I can do.
That's what I say.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know shit, and I was like, I know you're fucking stupider than me. Not you. I'm pointing at
no, but exactly. That's what I always say. I go, I know I don't know anything, and I know more than you.
Yeah.
Because and you're right. And you know, it's funny. You get in trouble by looking at both sides. People get upset if you won't join a tribe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's crazy. Yeah, I want to train. If it wasn't for I have my parents and my kids, we had actually put my son back into training when everything reopened, but then we were just a little bit scared because my mother-in-law was around and everything else. We're like, that's a lot of people that are there in one building. But if I was just to go train with a couple of friends, like I think that'd be awesome.
Well, being a single bachelor living alone with no exposure to old people, then you don't have any problem with me training.
Yeah, absolutely not. I think we should all be responsible for ourselves. Like, man, if you want to go smoke something or eat something or whatever that's going to harm you, like that's on you. You know, as long as you're not passing it on to someone else or hurting someone else, like I think we should be able to kill ourselves if we want. Like it shouldn't be like there shouldn't be anything that we're not allowed to do to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, and look, this was, you know, when this first happened, it was more about the community, right? And it's too bad that from day one, they did just, maybe it's just the way it unfolded for them too, but it's a shame that we couldn't get united to do this, but then also when the curve was flattened to then say, assess the level of risk for your situation and make appropriate decisions. Because not everybody's in the same boat. You know, I drive on the 405, and I feel like my chances of getting killed in the 405 are way higher than dying of COVID, you know?
1,000%. Now, let's talk a little bit about your work. So, professional comedian and magician. Let's talk about how that started. One of my favorite shows is Magic for Humans. I don't know if you've watched that on Netflix.
You know, I've only seen a little bit of, but Justin Willman is a really good friend of mine.
Oh, really? Yeah.
We've known each other for years.
Oh, really? Yeah. Jake and I, my 7-year-old and I watched them all. We thought they're hilarious.
What about Fool Us with Penn and Teller? Do you guys, you and your kids watch that?
I haven't seen that. No, I haven't checked that out.
Oh, my brother and my nephews, my brother and his son, they watched that one together. You would love Penn and Teller. Penn and Teller's Fool Us. That's a great magic show to watch with your kid.
Okay, I'll check that out. I've seen them live and I've really enjoyed them. But now, so with you, did you have a really early start? Was it magic first? Was it comedy? How did that all come about?
Yeah, I started doing magic. I mean, from my earliest memories, I've been doing that since I was really little. My brother was a magician, still is. He's a world-class jazz and blues sax player, but he did magic like as a kid and as a teenager. So I grew up, I'm the youngest of six kids, and a lot of musicians, a lot of artist-minded siblings. And so I fell in love with magic, started getting paid to do it as a teenager. And I did it all through college. I fell in love with stand-up comedy also at my earliest memory. I mean, every form of comedy. I used to listen to the Dr.
Oh yeah,
Demento radio show,
love that.
and I just loved anything comedy, movies, stand-up, whatever. And then being a child of the 80s during the big comedy boom and, the introduction of cable TV, I was just watching, stand-up comedy constantly. When I got into college, I decided to quit magic and to only do stand-up. Now, I was I hadn't really done stand-up yet. I started doing open mics in Orlando. I went to University of Central Florida in Orlando. So I was going to a weekly open mic, and as I was approaching graduation, I'm like, I'm going to quit magic and focus all of my attention just on stand-up. And that's what I did. So I was like 21, I believe, the first time I actually tried to do straight stand-up comedy with no magic. And then I got an internship / eventually a job / eventually got fired from the Howard Stern show. So I was working in radio in Orlando, Florida. I was the morning show producer there and a DJ, and I got an internship on the Howard Stern show. And I used that as an excuse to move to New York City to pursue stand-up because you could do like 2 or 3 open mics a day there. And Stern started to pay me for certain jobs I was doing. And then one day I streaked the studio and I got fired for that. You could check, if you go Zach Waldman, Howard Stern on YouTube, the TV show Extra did a thing about me getting fired. I was 23 years old. And then I went to work for Kenny Kramer, the real Kramer, the inspiration for the character on Seinfeld. He has a tour in New York City called Kramer's Reality Tour. The first hour's in a theater, then he takes you on a bus tour of Manhattan with a Seinfeld theme. And he used to be a stand-up comic, so he's hilarious. He's a great personality, cartoon character of a guy. And he was basically supported me in New York City. All I had to do was help him with his tour. In the theater portion, I would warm up the audience, try a little of my horrible stand-up that was god-awful, but he let me do it. And then I would introduce him and help him with the tour. And he basically funded my life for, I don't know, probably a year and a half or so. And then I moved to Chicago, did the improv thing for a couple of years out there. Just, I'm not into acting. I'm not really into improv, but I thought I would help me as a performer. Mm-hmm. And it was true because there was a lot of access in Chicago that I didn't have in New York. I was getting to do a lot more shows in front of real audiences as opposed to other open micers. Right. And so I started to evolve a lot as a performer in Chicago is really where I started to grow and finally started getting paid to do stand-up. So it was several years before I ever got paid money to do stand-up, where I'd been making money as a magician since I was a kid. And so I probably did stand-up for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before I ever got paid to do it. And then left Chicago and moved out here to Santa Monica, where I moved September 1st of 2000. And been in the same exact apartment in the same place for 20 years. And then when I moved out here, I was like, oh, the Magic Castle is out here. And for people that don't know, the Magic Castle is a private club in Hollywood. And you're not allowed inside unless you're a magician or unless you're a member or invited by a member. Guys have to wear jackets and ties. It's this old Victorian mansion with several theaters, bars, and a restaurant, a private library only the magicians can access, and all kinds of events around magic like lectures and swap meets. And there's no place in the world like the Magic Castle. And so when I moved out here, I think I was 27. So I decided to get back into magic and focused on corporate events, private parties. And that's what I've done all this time, and started to get really successful out here. And everything was, life was perfect. I was living the dream. I was doing jujitsu. I had just had a lot of focus in my life where every day all I did was have to the business I have specializing in corporate events kind of like runs itself now. So all I had to do every day was write jokes, work on magic tricks, and study jujitsu videos and go to jujitsu. And my comedy, my magic, and my jujitsu was all the best it had ever been. It was like all I had left to do in life was try to get to that last pillar of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and achieve self-actualization. I was like, I'm one step away from enlightenment is how I felt. And then COVID came along, and here I am trying to make a living as a YouTuber now because comedy and magic is all completely gone. The Magic Castle isn't going to be open probably for a year. The comedy club's the same thing, and LA is still locked down harder than anywhere. So there's the story.
That's what I was going to ask. So we'll get back into the COVID, but that 4 to 5 years where you're not getting paid to do comedy, what was going on in your head? Do you have the dream that you're going to be up on a big stage and you're going to be making a lot of money from it eventually? Was it hard to hold on to that dream, or what was going on? Because a lot of people would give up. A lot of people would not last that long, I don't think.
So, okay, what happened was after Kenny Kramer, I moved to Chicago and I got a day job. So I had a full-time job with salary, benefits, the whole thing. It was at a small outdoor apparel manufacturer. It was kind of like a small Patagonia. They used to be called Horny Toad Activewear. They changed their name 4 or 5 years ago to Toad & Co. So they're still around. They're in Santa Barbara, but at the time they were in Chicago. And that was my day job. I was the customer service manager, which meant I managed myself because I was the whole customer service department. And they were a small company, but really good people. And it was actually a really good. I'm glad you could hear me this whole time. I realized I had my mic off in one thing, but luckily it's not connected to where I'm talking to you. Jesus.
No, yeah, sounds good.
I imagine you would have told me an hour ago, but sorry, I got distracted by it. I was like, how was that off? They were, they're doing great now, but they were a new company at the time. And I was in this improv troupe, and I was also at the Players Workshop at the Second City. And the owner knew that I was pretty much doing my job and getting out of there, and basically doing the bare minimum, and that all of my focus was on stand-up comedy and writing sketches for this troupe I was in and all that. And one day he pulls me into the office because the company really was struggling. Sometimes your paycheck would bounce, that kind of shit. And he pulls me into the office and says, I know one day we're going to be a really successful company, and whomever is here during these days, you're the foundation of it. And I promise if you stick with me, that eventually when we are successful, you're going to reap the rewards. I'm not going to forget that your paycheck bounced and that you stuck it out with me. He said, but I need somebody that this is going to be his whole life, because we need all of us to put everything in this to save the company, to be successful, to get where we need to be. And I know that you really want to be a comedian. And this is what I think you need to decide. You should either go all in on that and make that your complete focus, so you're not divided between a day job and that. He's like, find some flexible work or something, but make that your priority and really go all out. And he's like, and if you do that, I think it'd be great. I'm all for it. He goes, I'm an entrepreneur. I want you to follow your dreams. He said, on the other hand, if you're not sure that you want to go all in and you want to follow that dream, if it's not a burning passion, if it's not what you see yourself doing, I need you to go all in here. And so I said, all right, I'm going to go all in on comedy. And so I got a job at a company they don't exist anymore. It was such an awesome gig. I worked for a company called Chicago Trolley, where I gave tours of Chicago. I drove a trolley and had a mic in the other hand, just like you're doing stand-up comedy, but you're driving a trolley. and I made a ton of money. And it was essentially like an open mic every night that I worked, because you could do whatever you wanted. You could give a tour, or you could just treat it like a bus. People paid to, like, it was a hop on, hop off pass that went around a route. So they might get on, and that particular trolley driver might not say anything, and then stop, drop you off at the Art Institute. But then the next one is like me, who's looking for any excuse to have a captive audience. And oh my God, I used to, that probably helped me become a better comedian than maybe anything I had ever done up to that point. And I was making a mint. And then when I moved, so I did have a job while I was trying to do these things. Like, you know, when I quit magic to do stand up at 21, I was working in radio and going to school full time. And then when I worked for Stern, I was getting paid some. And then when I worked for Kenny, and then I had the day job and then the trolley job. So I always had some kind of, you know, I wasn't just starving.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got from Chicago to Santa Monica, I had a temp job for a short period of time. And then, you know, I had already made a good living for many years as a magician growing up. And I just thought, you know, the Magic Castle's out here. This is the short version, but the Magic Castle's out here. I would rather do 4 kids' birthday parties on a weekend, like 2 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. And you can make a lot of money. By the way, Justin Willman, Magic for Humans, when him and I first became friends, that's what he was primarily doing, was kids' birthday parties. But you know what? He was like one of the best kids' birthday party magicians in town. He's always, so like, you know, if you're Justin Willman 20 years ago specializing in kids' birthday parties, but you're bringing a show out that's like unbelievable, guess what? Moms in Beverly Hills will give you $1,000. It's nothing to them. $1,000. So that's, you know, what's great about out here. You can get a reputation among certain, you know, communities and work all the time because you become their guy. And I did that. Justin did that. And then, you know, Justin evolved, and his big break was getting to be host of a show called Cupcake Wars. So Justin's had quite a journey himself, but a great guy. But my point is, if you're a good magician, you could make $1,000 a weekend in the afternoons on a Saturday and Sunday doing magic. And I realized that, you know what, the only reason I wouldn't do it, you know, again, I was 27. It's like, what is it, an ego thing? You don't want to do magic for kids. And I was like, George Carlin did a kids show, you know, I was like, you know what, I'm out. So I had my dad ship me all my old magic stuff. The first time I ever went to the Magic Castle in my life was to audition. So I auditioned, passed the audition the first time, set up shop. I got a, you know, fictitious business name, you know, a sole proprietorship, put up a website and started marketing, and got gigs around town, like steady gigs at restaurants and bars doing magic. So I had some steady income from those. Started doing corporate events, private parties, and eventually started teaching a class called Mathemagic, where I would teach little kids how to do magic tricks based on math. And I had 2 schools a day, Monday through Friday. So I had all of this work that I could do that was totally flexible, that left all of my evenings free to go to the Comedy Store or the Improv or whatever. So I started, you know, and that was it. And then eventually I didn't have to do kid shows anymore. And eventually I didn't do Math Magic anymore. And then it was almost all really high-end corporate events and private parties. And then occasionally I would get a theater gig, like I'd be part of a show that was in a theater, or I'd get a spot here or there at the Improv. I did the San Luis Obispo Comedy Festival, was the last like super cool thing I did right before COVID lockdown. And that was awesome. A lot of great comedians on that. And so, but now, I mean, you know, again, here, all roads lead to it's all gone.
I just sat through, well, it was really good. I went to Brian Posehn. He did a stand-up. It was, well, sit down at his house, and I watched it. It was funny, but you could also, like he was saying, just how uncomfortable it was and how difficult it is to try to do, you know, comedy to someone that you may not even be looking at. He didn't see anyone on his screen. So are you doing that, or like, so how is that working?
I think these virtual comedy and magic shows are generally awful and generally a waste of time. There's always exceptions. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. In the very beginning, as a favor to a couple of people, I did a couple of virtual shows. And no, what I'm doing is I'm trying to make it as a YouTuber. I'm going the YouTube route. I'm trying to do things like, if you've ever seen Andrew Schultz or John Oliver does Last Week Tonight, I pick one topic and I write a script for it, and I try to make it a funny deep dive on one topic.
Okay.
And then, and I have video clips and pictures mixed in with it. But no, I'm not doing any stand-up virtually or any magic virtually. And I'm monetizing it by, instead of Patreon, I just have my own paywall. I have my own fan club. And what I'm offering in the fan club is magic related, though, because inside, behind the paywall, I'm teaching super easy magic tricks and bar bets. Bar bets like, you're with your pals and some silly bet for a drink or something, So I'm teaching, and I'm also doing some special, like really uncensored casts, things I can't do on YouTube. So I'm making short pre-produced videos that hopefully people find funny. I've had a couple that have done well. I did one about Chris D'Elia and the sexual assault allegations. That video, I got like 22,000 views, which for me is a lot because at the time it took off, I only had 200 subscribers. I just started. I'm like, all right, I'm going to start this. And so it's growing. And so I'm putting out, I'm also doing live streams Monday through Friday. I go live on YouTube. And I basically just react to current events. I'll have 4 or 5 news stories. I'll read the story. I'll react. I'll give my opinion. Kind of what we were talking about. I try to look at both sides and try to not look at it like I'm a member of a tribe, instead of just, instead of looking at it left or right, just seeing what they're trying to say, trying to see all different points of view. And then, hopefully those pre-produced videos and the live streams, people go, hey, I want to support this guy. So I'm going to go to his little fan page. And then when they get there, there's all kinds of ways they can support me, basically. So
how do people find you? Is it all just go on YouTube and look up Zach Waldman? Is it under there? Or do you have your own website too?
Well, it's all on my website. So if you go to zachwaldman.com, but if you go to zachwaldman.com/fans, that's specifically the fan page. That's new. I mean, before there was no fan page on my website. My website was for booking private events and corporate events. So if you go to my homepage, you'd be like, what? But there is on the menu, there's something that says fan club. And that's what it's basically a paywall I set up. There's some free things on there too. There's plenty of free content. And there's ways people could support me just by subscribing to my YouTube channel. Is like one of the most valuable things a person could do right now is just find my YouTube channel and subscribe. You need 1,000 people to monetize it, 1,000 subscribers. And I've got like just over 500. So I'm like halfway there, All
right, let's do it. I know that's something that I never focused on. And I really should. I realize how powerful YouTube can be. Now, let's say things go back to normal. Let's say Magic Castle and everywhere else opens back up. I know a lot of comedy clubs have actually gone under too, but let's just imagine things go back to normal. If it did and your YouTube was doing well and making money, would you just continue to do the YouTube, or would you go back to the comedy?
One of the mistakes I used to make in life was being too scattered and not focused. I told you when things got really good is when I was hyper focused just on comedy, magic, and jujitsu, right? Well, when all this happened, I decided I'm going to use what I learned and be completely focused on doing a YouTube channel. I've been live streaming since 1997. After I got fired from Stern, the very next place I worked was the first full-time internet-only radio station to exist. Back then, Mark Cuban was a nobody, and his audio net was the main competitor of the technology the company I worked for was using. And so I've always been a broadcaster/writer at heart. I love to write and I love broadcasting. That's why I worked in radio. I wanted to do talk radio. That was the original dream, and then stand-up took over. But the point is, I love doing it. I love making YouTube videos. I love going live. I love, I've got some fans. I have people that have signed up. I've had people send me equipment to help me improve the podcast. Like, I can't believe the generosity and the support I've gotten from people. And what I've decided is I'm not going anywhere, because all of these years of trying to make it work, I have tried for many years to be successful, either as a caster, or as a YouTuber, as a podcaster, and I've never really cracked the code. But I had that one video do well. I'm part of a podcast network. This guy Maddox, pretty famous dude, Madcast Media. And Maddox is always, he's always encouraging me. It's like, dude, all it takes is one video and everything can be different. So to answer your question, I've decided I'm not going to quit this. I'm either just never going to be successful at it, or I'm going to die trying, because I love doing it. And so what I imagine is, realistically, I need 1,000 people to join my fan club for me to be able to live off of this, right? And the pace I'm going at, I think I can do it, but I'm probably a year to a year and a half away from that being a reality, probably. But I also think I'm a minimum a year away from corporate events coming back the way they were. I'm typically hired a year to 2 years in advance for a corporate event. Those events are huge. These are events with 400 or 500 people, 1,000 people, that are planned way in advance, because there's so many logistics and, renting of the convention space, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't see those events coming back for a long time. I purposely I started doing my show at noon in anticipation that my business will return. And when it does, I wanted to be doing this show at a time that wouldn't interfere. So that's why I started doing, my podcast, sorry. When I'm doing it at noon, that way I know that if I have a gig that evening, it doesn't interfere. So to answer your question, man, I am going to die trying to be successful at this. And if I am as successful, even if I reach just the goal of 1,000 people joining my fan club, I would start to actually become pickier with the other types of gigs I'm doing. I think if I could get to that goal, I would be like, no, I want more of this. I don't know. This is always, it's just incredibly satisfying. The dream is, instead of doing, I like corporate events are great, but the dream would be to be popular enough on YouTube that I could rent a theater and sell tickets and have my other comedy and magician friends open up for me, right? That's the long-term dream. But right now, I try not to think about how everything has been taken, and I'm trying not to think about how impossible what I'm doing seems at the moment, because otherwise I'll lose my mind. So I'm just trying to stay super present and just grinding. All that's going on in my head is just grinding. Keep doing it. Keep putting out content. Keep trying. Because if I'm not doing that, I don't really have any other options, to be quite honest with you. This is all I've done for over 20 years, is stand-up comedy and magic full time. So almost 20 years on the dot, actually. So it's I don't know. That's the answer. I'm going to keep trying.
Dude, I love that approach. Because, dude, that's pretty much my philosophy, because I have not broken out yet. Like, I want to break out. I know I can. I see the trajectory, but
you see other people do it, right?
Yeah. So I know it's possible. And it's just figuring out. It is that grind. It's like, okay, no, I have to write today. If I'm going to be successful, I have to write today. I have to write today. I have to write today. So, no, man, I applaud that. It could be super depressing. It could be super hard. This is an incredibly difficult time. So to have that attitude where, like, no, I'm just going to keep doing it. So that's awesome.
And it's not stand-up, but all I do is crack jokes. My podcast, I don't do any politics. I don't do any Trump. I purposely am choosing odd news stories and making fun of them and, trying to provide comedic commentary. But I'm trying to really make my show a bastion for people that want to get away from that. I'm like, if you want COVID news or politics, there's a billion places to get that from that are better than me. So I talk about odd news stories, like, what I'm talking about, the weird, quirky stuff. I'll read weird Reddit confessions and goof on that and try to imagine what people are thinking. So it's like a different kind of comedy, you know. It's when I was in radio, it was a performance. It's just a different kind of performance. It's odd because there's no feedback, but there is feedback because I see the chat and people they type in LOL. I'm like, all right, man, I'm doing something, you know, or they're subscribing or they're hitting thumbs up. So it's at least you don't feel like you're speaking into the ether. By the way, real quick, we were talking about, eventually your other books will be seen. That's a big part of YouTube too. It's like you have to constantly be making content so that if you do have a video that goes viral, then all of a sudden people go back and check out all the other videos you made. So same thing you're saying with your book, keep putting out these books. One of them hits the right chord at the right time, goes bonkers. Do you sell them on Amazon?
Yeah, they're all on Amazon. Some are on other places as well, but I have most of my traffic through Amazon.
So let's say one of them just goes hog wild on Amazon, then all of a sudden you have thousands of 5-star reviews and people go, well, what else did this guy do? Well, this whole backlog is going to give all kinds of, stuff for people to read. And so, yeah, man, it's all kind of the same thing, right? Just different.
Yeah, different form of art, but that's exactly my thinking. I was like, you know what? Just as long as we keep producing good stuff, keep putting good stuff out there.
Well, I really do appreciate talking to you, man. This is close to. This makes me feel less lonely to see my friends even on Zoom because it's been tough. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I just wish you the best of luck with everything you're doing, man. Love you. You're the best.
Thanks, Zach. Thank you so much for coming on, man. And definitely conversation.
I know I did. I got a lot out of it. Had a lot of fun.
All right, man. Have a good day.
Later. Now it's story time. We're going with something from Untold Mayhem. I didn't choose beforehand. I was like, man, do I have any funny stories? I don't really. Although the last one, Last Will and Testament, I kind of wrote that a little tongue-in-cheek. That is my last will and testament. Here it is. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. See you next week. Later.
Last Will and Testament. Death. It's what I write about. It's what I've been thinking about since I can remember. It's what I wished for the first half of my life. Now that I'm 47, death has become even more real, more of a shadow hanging over my head. I stay relatively healthy and grateful for what I have, always reminding myself I'm lucky to be alive and that nothing's promised. Except death. That motherfucker is guaranteed. Even though I understand death's inevitable, I've never made a will. My wife often points out we should do one, and I always agree, but that's as far as we get. But that's going to change because I've changed my perspective. Death doesn't have to be so depressing. It's just part of our cycle. We come into this world tearing skin, bathed in blood, and welcomed with screams. Why not go out just as gloriously? Over the last year, I've seen some cool stories about people making the most out of death. I applaud them. This is the one time in your life where you are truly the center of attention. Soak that shit up. So, for my last will and testament. First off, I want to get the party started ASAP to keep me looking as fresh as possible. Ideally, I'd like to do the screening a day or two after my demise. Let's book a decent venue, something with a stage. Just please, no Chuck E. Cheese. The stage is important because that's where I'll be. Everyone else down below. Instead of a casket, I'd like to be propped up in a chair. I'm not too picky about what pose I'm in, but make it look natural, hands where we can see them. We'll need a friend who will usher people up one by one to say goodbye. If people are feeling generous and would like to help pay for the funeral arrangements, they can stuff bills and personal checks in my pockets or down my shirt. If they're cheap or claim to only have credit cards, be sure to set up payments through PayPal. It'd also be a good idea to hire a photographer to capture these moments. Package deals and a la carte purchase options should be made available. I suggest giving each person up to 3 poses with me, and they can do whatever they want with my arms and legs. We can also use the best photos for a Give Me Your Money app to defray costs. Some people in the crowd might not be cool with all this, so let's loosen them up with a little music, starting slow with some classical, but transitioning smoothly to something peppy. That's when the DJ can play my pre-recorded message. asking people to head to the dance floor. This is a time to celebrate, not be pouty and sad. As soon as everyone's on their feet, it's time for the marionette show. I don't expect any fancy dance moves, but I want them making me look alive up there. At least Weekend at Bernie's quality. The DJ will invite people to dance with me and offer one last goodbye, but a minimum payment will be required. After all, this funeral ain't cheap. That will wrap up this screening, with everyone in high spirits. At this point, it'd be a huge letdown to simply throw me in a fire or toss me in a hole and let maggots munch through my brain. Get me over to the tanners so they can slice off my tattooed back piece and start the curation process, turning it into a cape that will be FedExed to the highest bidder about a week after the funeral. Depending on the cost and time involved, we might as well slice off my other tattoos and see if we can't get something out of them. Maybe a nice headband or two, or sew them together for a belt. From there, I'd like to be stuffed. Maybe have the hole in my back patched up with a slab of fresh skin off someone else. I'm not sure where we'll be technology-wise when I blink out of existence, but I'm guessing we should be able to keep me in relatively good shape for at least a couple days. Last thing I'd want to do is start leaking all over the couch or recliner. Ideally, my family would be able to move me, reposition me, dress me as they see fit. Once I start to spoil or the family grows tired of me, we prepare for one last hurrah. Drones. Yep, they're not just used for killing people in foreign countries. I've seen videos of a guy flying his dead cat, a deer, a cow. So why not me? If the whole stuffing process dries me out too much or makes a mark drone impossible, then I'm fine scrapping the taxidermy because turning me into a drone has top priority. Once they've scraped out my innards and replaced them with electronics, fuel, and explosives, everyone will meet us at the beach. It will be about an hour before sunset, time to start the campfire and tell stories over drinks. When the sun begins its descent, my friends and family get a chance to fly me, 1 to 2 minutes each, depending on available sunlight. Once everyone has had a turn, my son can don my tattoo cape and headband or belt and take the helm. All the others will grab bows and arrows. If Jake throws a fit about it not being fair, someone please trade with him and let him take some shots. It might even be nice to let him have the first one. For my final flight, let's blast Iron Maiden's Flight of Icarus, the entire event filmed from above and below in order to share on YouTube. Near the end of the song, everyone lights their arrows and I make my final climb toward the sun. Be sure to bring a lot of arrows in case people are drunk and terrible shots. The song will also loop in case this part drags. Eventually, an arrow will hit, I will burst into flames, and a giant explosion will scatter my pieces over the sea. This is my last will and testament, although I give my family permission to do whatever they see fit. My only rule is that no one take it too seriously. My run will be exactly as long as it needs to be, and I want everyone to know that I'm grateful for every minute of it.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.